Good morning. I'm sitting on the ground this morning because my chair broke. But it's so perfect because what I want to say is so much better conveyed sitting on the ground than in a chair. The the corn fields are right here and they're gently blowing in the breeze. And there's something childlike about sitting on the ground. Anyway, do you remember life? Don't just breeze past that question and say, oh, yes, of course I remember life because I'm actively doing it right now. Actually think about that question for a moment. Because I used to live in the rut. I used to live in the rut of constantly waiting for the current thing to end. I was always waiting for the workday to end, the workout to end, even the current conversation, the current interaction to end. And in moments of sobriety, I would wake up like an epiphany from a dream and want so bad to be in the present moment, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to be in the present moment because I was discontent with the present moment. And it's like I was always waiting for something that was never going to come. But if you live your life in that way, always waiting for the current thing to end, you can extrapolate that out, and your life is basically a liminal space. If the entirety of your life is just waiting for the current thing to end, you're basically waiting for your life to end. But that's not what we're meant to do. The glory of God is man fully alive. But as you get older, it's confusing because life seems to be this pattern of working existing, or struggling existing. And it's almost like we forget what life is. And so let me start here. There's a grand narrative that runs throughout the entirety of the Bible. If you look at the Bible, there is the books of the Bible. The books are made up of chapters. The chapters are made up of micro stories. In the New Testament, it's often parables. And the entirety of the parables make up the chapters make up the books make up the grand narrative, stories on top of stories on top of stories on top of stories. And there's a thread that runs through the entirety of the library. That's what Bible means. It means library. There's a thread that runs through the entirety of it, multiple threads, but one of which is that man is maturing. The human being is maturing. Because you look at somebody like Adam, and you read the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and there's no way that you could look at somebody like Adam to Abraham, Abraham to David, and think they are the exact same person. David is way more mature, and that's not to say he's better, but he's more abundant. He's a more complicated character. His life is more complicated. And Adam is kind of like a toddler. He's like a naive young child. And I don't even mean that in a bad way, but that is what it is. And so as human beings mature throughout the Bible, you go from Adam, Abraham, Moses, David. The characters keep getting more and more complex throughout the whole Old Testament until you reach the New Testament. In the way that stories go, pretty much every story follows the same pattern. They're all a spiral. That is, they start in one place and then they go away from the place in which they started. But they always circle back and they come back to the original place. But it's a spiral because it's like an expanded version of the original place. It's like a redeemed version of the original place. And that, among other reasons, is why people refer to Jesus Christ as the new Adam. And they refer to Mary as the new Eve. Ave Maria. Ave backwards is Eva. The new Adam, the new Mary, the redeemed version of these individuals. And so if you look at the message of the Bible and the nature of stories in general, it's as though the direction that we are headed as human beings is to make it to the garden. But notice I didn't say back to the Garden of Eden, but rather to something that is like the garden, but a more abundant version, a more mature version of the garden. And so what is the garden redeemed? What is the more abundant version of the Garden of Eden? Man, this is so wonderful if you think about what this means. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus, you read the Sermon on the Mount, and as with everything else, you can extract focal points, meaning read the whole thing and then distill it down to one or two lines. And so, for example, if you read the Sermon on the Mount, the focal point you could say is love God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your strength, and all of your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do this and you will live. And so that's the focal point, but it's the focal point of one perspective. It is the focal point of command. If you had to take away one message, one crucial message from the entirety of the Sermon on the Mount, that is what Jesus is telling you to do. That is the commandment. Love God with everything that you are and everything that you have, and love your neighbor as yourself. And there's a promise, do that and you will live. That is all that we want. In our heart, I believe that is all that we want, life. No more liminal spaces, but rather life. So that's the focal point of command regarding the Sermon on the Mount. But you can look at it from a different perspective as well. And relative to this question of what is the new garden? What is our destination? Where are we trying to go? Well, it's very clear that we're trying to make it to the kingdom of God, but people hear the kingdom of God and they correlate with that with heaven, and that is heaven, yes. But it is also, in a sense, something that is possible today. Jesus Christ is always saying the kingdom of God is at hand. The kingdom of God is here today. He is the kingdom of God. And so when you read the Sermon on the Mount and figure out what is the place that it is describing, because it is describing a place, and you could say that place is the kingdom of God, or you could use more understandable language and say it is describing the city of God. And that's more digestible because kingdom has connotations that people in the modern world don't understand, but you certainly can imagine a city of God. And so when he's going through the Beatitudes and he's saying, blessed are you when people persecute you for my sake, blessed are you, ... blessed are you, ... He's describing something about the citizenry of the city of God. He's describing the repentant nature of the city of God. He's describing what the people of the city of God are focused on. Their soul is focused on God. And so that's another focal point. But then this is where we are heading. This is my point with all of this. This is the beauty. He says, don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about what you'll eat and what you'll drink. Don't worry about your clothes. Look at the lilies of the field. They don't toil, and yet even Solomon in all of his glory wasn't clothed as beautifully as one of these lilies. Isn't life more than food and drink? Isn't life more than clothes? And so we know certainly that life is more than these things, but if you examine your heart and you reflect, especially I think as we get older, there's a lingering question, which is we know life isn't those things, but then it's like, well, what is life? Because I actually just don't know. I don't know how to define it. I don't know what words I would use to describe what life is. And it's like, how can I discover it? How can I figure out what life is meant to be? Well, later in the same book in Matthew 18, I think it is, his disciples, Jesus' disciples, are asking him, who is the greatest in the kingdom of God? Who is the greatest in the city of God? Who is the greatest? And Jesus Christ looks at a child, he calls the child over to him, and he says to his disciples, unless you humble yourself and become like a child, you will not enter the kingdom of God. Unless you humble yourself and become like a child, you will not enter the kingdom of God. And it's like, well, what did he mean by that? What does that even mean? It is the answer to this question of what is life? And obviously him saying, be like a child, doesn't tell you what life is, but rather it is another commandment. And through listening to that commandment, you can remember what life is, because it is the thing that we all knew when we were children. It is seeing the world with new eyes, seeing the world with righteous curiosity, objective, simple, no agenda curiosity, just curious as to what things are. It is hopes, it is dreams. It is seeing the world without the preconceived notions, unacquainted to ambition, letting go of the things that cloud our sight, cloud our understanding, and cause us to be stuck in this monotonous trap of thinking that life is working and existing, struggling and existing. That's certainly not what life is. And it's hard for adults to remember what life is. You have to humble yourself and become like a child. And I know that me saying hopes and dreams, those are like cliche words that we hear all of the time. Those don't do it justice. When we're talking about the question of what is life, just saying hopes and dreams and things like that, that doesn't do it justice. Rather, you know and I know. But the only way I can't convey it to you, maybe I could convey it to you through a story, but we don't have time for that. The way for you to know is to literally be like a child again. But in the same way that the Bible matures and human beings mature, and you go from Adam to David to Jesus, eventually the new Adam, and you go from the Garden of Eden, the place where we were exiled, and the pain that we've all experienced because we've all been wounded by sin. We're not guilty of the original sin, but it affects us. Adam's sin affects us because we were wounded by it. And we've matured through contending with the world and dealing with the world. And there are lessons we've learned. There are beneficial things about maturity. And we should keep those, but we've got to go back to the place where we began. We've got to remember play. We've got to remember hopes and dreams. We've got to remember life. And then if you can go through your life and as you become an adult, put the childish things away and mature, yet go full circle and pick back up the things that you forgot as a child, the things that were good, that were taken from you by the wounds, the way that the world has wounded you, then all of the bad things, the sin, we can go back to Adam's original sin. It is redeemed and it becomes Ofeli culpa. Ofeli culpa. Oh happy fault. Even our faults can become good because we grow from them. And if we can go back to play and we can remember hopes and dreams, but see the world, most importantly, see the world as we once did when we were children with new eyes and fresh understanding, then we can remember life. We can remember life and we can be citizens in the kingdom of God, the city of God. Right. And for now, that's all that I have. Goodbye.